Hello.
Okay, hello.
Hello, world.
This is That Marvelous Beat, a Marvel and Beatles fan cast.
Boom.
I'm Rachel Levin.
I'm she who shall not be named.
All right.
Mysterious.
My co-host doesn't have a name. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the first Marvel movie, Iron Man, coming out in 2008.
Beautiful.
And co-host is going to talk about...
I'm going to talk about the beginning of the Beatles' career.
So we have Lemon LaCroix.
We have a whole... Do you want to hear this?
ASMR. Oh my god, it sprayed on me.
Sorry.
Okay. And then we also have watermelon gummies and a Mars bar.
Beautiful. Haribo.
Okay. Hell yeah, let's get this show on the road.
Okay. Mansplain to me the first Marvel movie.
Okay.
And just for reference, I don't think I've ever seen a Marvel movie all the way through.
And I've never looked up Beatles history, so
Perfect.
Here we are. Yeah, so the first Marvel movie, Iron Man 2008, I'm pretty sure everybody knows who plays Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr. He's like...
Right. He went to our school, I think.
He went to Samo High. Shout out Samo High class of like 78.
Okay.
I'm going to do themology, and then I'm going to do how it connects to today.
Okay.
So, this movie came out in 2008, which feels like so long ago. I was 4. And
I was
basically,
3.
basically what happens is, this man, Tony Stark, is like a billionaire weapons developer. He's a child genius. His dad was also an inventor. He's like a spoiled rich kid. And he's all cocky, gambling instead of going to award ceremonies, all that kind of thing. Somebody I probably wouldn't like if I met in real life, but on screen he's very charismatic, whatever. So basically...
Whatever. It's Robert Downey Jr., whatever.
It's Robert Downey Jr., and he was like 40. Oh yeah, that's another thing. He was like barely over, he was probably like 8 years sober from like terrible drug addiction. And, like, if he hadn't had this movie, his career would have been, like, over.
Really?
Yeah.
8 years is, like, a solid amount of time to be clean.
It is, but he was a child actor, and then...
Right, that always fucked him all up.
Yeah, and he got, like, addicted to drugs. I think his parents were, like, fucked up, too. And basically, like, he did a bunch of, like, movies when he was a teenager, kind of like a heartthrob teenager, 80s movies. And then he got
Was he in The Outsiders?
No. I think that was before his time.
Okay.
He was in a movie called, it was called, like, Sub-Zero or something.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, that's the movie I think he's best known for, besides the Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. But then, okay, so the director, Jon Favreau, had done a movie with him prior to that, and basically, like, Marvel Studios was very close to being bankrupt at this point. Like, they didn't do anything. I mean, DC had Superman, Batman, they had all these successful things.
Oh, right, this is like a... Sorry, I feel like I'm interrupting too much.
No, this is good.
This is like, it's like a Superman or superhero rivalry, like business franchise rivalry. Huh?
I mean, Iron Man was like their revival because before that, they didn't, like, they had Spider-Man, but they kept rebooting him. Like, they kept making movies and then abandoning them and then making them again. And they had sold the rights to Sony so that they could literally stay afloat. Mm-hmm. And then in 2008, Jon Favreau was hired on as a director, and he hired Robert Downey Jr. because he was sort of like this down-on-his-luck actor. They wouldn't have to pay him that much. But he was absolutely invested. And back to the synopsis, because we got kind of sidetracked. Mm-hmm. So Tony Stark is this, like, cocky, billionaire, spoiled kid. And then he gets kidnapped by a, like, ISIS kind of copycat in the Middle East.
Damn, okay.
And they kidnap him and basically force him to make this bomb, right? Because he had just made a weapons presentation and they saw this and they were like, all right, we're going to snatch him so he can make that bomb for us. And instead of that, he meets this super smart science guy basically in captivity who motivates him to build this suit. And it's super clunky. You might have seen a picture. It's like it looks like Baymax from Big Hero 6, all like silver metal.
I've seen the Iron Man thing before.
Yeah, the original one, like...
I'm not sure what version, but I have seen a rendering of Iron Man.
I mean, well, no. The one that he wears later in the movie is iconic, like gold and red, which you've definitely seen.
Yeah, that's the one I've seen.
Yeah, well, there's like a Model 1 when he's in this cave in Afghanistan or wherever. That's just like a metal...
primitive suit.
Yeah, just like a metal, like, sack of bricks.
Got it.
And he basically, like, punches his way through this, like, big cave complex where they're holding him, and he escapes, and he gets picked up.
I just realized...
So basically, once he gets out of his captivity, right, he's totally has, like, a new perspective on life. I mean, he has seen what his weapons can do to people, and now he's determined to, like, stop creating them and, like, make a change in his life, basically, and in his company's life. And obviously, they're a weapons manufacturer, so it's a little bit of, you know, a crazy shift in everybody's lives. But he's really determined to make this change, and as the movie goes on, he's developing, like, the suits, he's saving... He's trying to go on these missions to, like, save people in the places where he was held captive in the Middle East, where there's a lot of war going on. And he, like, is determined to be a hero, and he becomes this really famous figure. Of course, people don't know that he's Tony Stark. They just know him as Iron Man, like the Iron Man. And the villain of this movie is... Okay, now it's going to get into spoilers territory. Basically, his mentor, or the person that looked after him after his father died, is this man called, oh shit, I forgot his name.
You want to Google it?
Okay, hold on, I'm going to Google it. Okay, I'm going to wait for this to load, but whatever. I'm just going to move on without saying his name.
The villain.
The villain.
It's just, we're twins. It's actually me. I'm the villain who we cannot name.
Yeah. If anybody ever watches Iron Man who hasn't seen it, that's actually my co-host in disguise.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this guy is, like, sort of his mentor, the person who runs the company when he can't because he's drunk or, you know, in some random girl's bed or whatever. And he is really determined to keep manufacturing weapons because that is what their company is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically that's the conflict, is that, like, Tony Stark wants to make this change in the company in his life, and this other person is like, I can't do that. This is not just I can't do that, but I don't want to let go of that money, right?
Right.
And in the end, he's also secretly manufacturing his own metal suit, but the key to that is that Tony Stark has the arc reactor, which is basically, he creates this, like, element, this chest piece that powers his suit and keeps him alive, because there is pieces of metal stuck in his, not quite in his heart, but, like, in the parts that go to his heart or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Arteries or something.
Yeah, his arteries, that's probably the word. And this, like, thing in his chest is keeping them from killing him, basically. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it's a little bit about him trying to become a better person, but it's also about, you know, dependency on this suit, and we kind of go further into that in Iron Man 2. Mm-hmm. But, and then in the end, you know, there's a big battle, big metal suit versus big metal suit, punch, 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 somebody gets... Okay, and then, so that's pretty much the plot, and then, of course, there's Pepper Potts, and, James Rhodes, who are his, like, friends, I guess, but they aren't quite as important to the plot.
Uh-huh. They're just, like, normal humans.
Yeah. Friends. Pepper Potts' love interest.
Are they in on it?
Pepper is in on it, and Rhodey is in on it once Iron Man flies through, like, military airspace or whatever, and they have to, like, shoot him down, and then he has to call Rhodey and be like, it's me in the suit! And so they don't literally kill him.
Like, he goes through a no-fly zone?
Yeah, well, that's his whole, like, thing. He's like, I'm gonna go cross country borders and save some prisoners. It's like, dude, you're violating so many accords right now. Yeah. Okay, my rating for Iron Man is, well, the Rotten Tomatoes rating is 94%. Audience. Wow. Yeah, it was, like, I mean, the thing about the movie is that it's, like, a really good movie, like, period, because they hadn't thought, you know, this is going to be a universe yet. It's not going to be the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's just Iron Man the movie.
Right. This was just.
Which makes it a really good standalone movie because it's just like Robert Downey Jr. is such a charismatic lead, and
like him being down on his luck, like you said, this being his comeback.
It's definitely a success story.
Exactly, that always puts a little more oomph behind it.
Definitely.
And the entire company, this movie being their comeback, you know.
No, yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that nobody thought it would be a comeback. I mean, Iron Man was like not a particularly well-known comic book character. Like it was.
DC so this was an adaptation. Are they all adaptations of comic
adaptations?
Books?
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, they're all adaptations. Yeah. Iron Man first appeared in a 1963 run of, I think, Tales of Suspense. Yeah, that's where a lot of the characters that we know come from. Like I think Spider-Man also comes from Tales of Suspense, but that was in 1963, and he didn't become super popular. I think mainly because he isn't like a super relatable character. He's a billionaire who had like this sort of. I mean, he's a fun character because he's sort of like nothing can touch him, but he's not like Spider-Man or Captain America where they're just like kids from New York who like get some power. Guy. Yeah, right. So my rating is, it's not my favorite of all movies, but it is definitely a really good, solid, standalone movie. I think I would give it like 8 out of 10.
Okay, that's a great rating.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's good. It's like I'd watch it again. Like I would watch it and then the next night I'd watch it again.
Nice.
So I consider that a really good movie.
Do some of the other Marvel movies kind of rely on it being part of the franchise more so? And does that take away from its, you know?
No, I mean, I think the thing to remember about Iron Man is it really sets the tone for the rest of the Marvel Universe. So in a way they rely on it, but they build on it so well that everything is a standalone movie.
Good.
It allowed the other ones to be developed, but they do a really good job of making each character interesting in their own right.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, and then I said I was going to do how it connects to today. I mean, I think it says a lot of really interesting things about war and about, you know, profit, capitalism, and ignoring morals and sort of stuffing away your conscience in the face of money, which is an age-old problem, right?
I mean, we could talk about that for hours.
Yeah, you
neoliberalism.
But I mean, he is still a billionaire. So, and he doesn't have this midlife crisis until he's in his 30s or whatever. So, he's still not my favorite character just because he is, you know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting basis for a superhero. Now that I realize they usually have that character arc of like, kind of like from the slums to being this superhero or just being like an average person. But starting off as a billionaire is not something that I usually hear.
I think you can definitely also make a connection to just like the era. 2008, there was a recession, right? I feel like a lot of people wanted that untouchable, successful character.
The American dream that was, it was slowly but surely giving way.
Yeah. So, you know, was it the best character to start on and start a franchise with? I mean, you could theorize if they had started with Captain America, might it be a different type of universe? Maybe. But I think that the sort of wry humor that kind of ripples through the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe started with Iron Man, and he set a really important tone that made the rest of the Marvel Universe so likable. So overall, I mean, great movie, fun to watch, has a lot of really interesting things to say, a lot of moral quandaries that you just kind of have to decide if you're going to overlook them or, you know, embrace them.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Thank you for this synopsis and connection.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, reflecting on that, I haven't seen it, as we, I think, established.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, good. And yeah, that money dynamic is probably what stands out to me most.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, this being the first kind of like the Marvel's kicking down of the door into what is now their superhero universe, but it is like that is a weird situation.
It's weird, and I think it's definitely of its time. I don't think the same movie could have been made today.
Yeah. From how you've described it, definitely not.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird sort of he's definitely a womanizer, so
yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. It is very of its time in the sense that that's what people wanted to see. Is this like typical kind of white dude, rich white, here to save the day, doesn't need anyone, billionaire.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely it had like a black main character and a female main character both in positions of power, so you could say good for it for that, but I think it's not the best that it could be.
I mean, yeah.
In terms of that, anyway. All right, your turn.
Okay, my turn. Okay, so I guess I'm just gonna start from the beginning.
Go for it.
So, the Beatles were all the generation prior to the Boomers. Like the very last year. I forget what.
So that's the Greatest Generation?
Yeah, something like that. Greatest Generation. I don't think the Lost Generation is the 20s.
And then it's the Silent Generation.
Silent Generation. So they're probably the Greatest Generation because they were all born early to mid 40s.
That sounds about right.
So, again, they were all born in Liverpool, in northern England.
What accents do they have?
Scouse accents. I'm not going to try and imitate it.
One of these days, though.
All I know is that the Scouse accent, what stands out most to me is their K sound. Sounds like a chaf in Hebrew. They say, like, I'm going to the market. You know, like, I can't do it, but it's like market.
Going to the market.
Yeah, like that. And if you watch Drag Race UK, the season 1 winner of Drag Race UK, the Vivian, she's a Scouser, and she has the accent.
All right, go out and watch that.
So if you want to see that, you know. Anyways, so let's start off, I guess. So I guess we're starting with John. John, his upbringing was definitely the most turbulent. And again, I'm just winging all this. I feel a little. It's okay.
Is he Penny Lane or Strawberry Fields?
He is Strawberry Fields. Okay. Paul is Penny Lane.
Got you.
We'll get on to that in a future episode. But essentially, John, Ringo's the oldest, but Ringo's Ringo. So whatever.
He's immortal.
Exactly. Yeah. And so John, he was born, and his mother was essentially the one who introduced him to rock music. However, his aunt raised him.
Okay.
Basically, his mom was kind of like, I don't know. She's depicted in everything that I read as this kind of fiery, fun-loving woman.
Maybe she didn't really want to have a child.
Exactly,
like
and
yeah.
she had all these sisters, and this aunt was like, "You're not fit to raise a child."
Oh shit!
Essentially, so she not stole John, but like took John, and the like whole situation was I believe the mom began seeing another man.
Oh.
And so John's dad, who was like a sailor or something, worked on a boat, so he wasn't around much.
Yeah.
Came back, found that she was having this affair, and the parents sat John down and were like, "Okay, mom or dad? Choose."
That's not a fun question.
Yeah. And so ultimately he chose mom. And there's all this stuff about how like the dad, like throughout his childhood, once he tried to like come back and steal him and say that they're going on a day trip to like Blackpool, which is a seaside town in the UK.
Not Liverpool.
Not Liverpool, Blackpool. Okay. Same, it's all a pool, right? But and tried to like smuggle him to New Zealand with him.
Ooh.
All this stuff. Very turbulent parent life, but basically the aunt Mimi was like, "Okay, this isn't gonna work. You're coming with me."
Yeah.
And so Mimi was an incredibly strict mother figure for him. and she has this quote that's semi-famous nowadays that's like, yeah, guitar's all great and all, but you're not gonna, like, make a living out of it.
Yeah, that's just every single parent.
Right. So, yeah, he had more of, like, a traditional mother out of Mimi.
Yeah.
And Mimi had a husband, too. That was kind of, like, the warm one in his now family. But he died when John was pretty young.
Mimi's husband,
yeah. So that was, like, the beginning of his encounter with death, which is honestly a lot.
And he already had some trauma.
No, he has so much trauma. Anyways, so Mimi's husband dies, and so he's just kind of off with Mimi, and then he finds out that his mom, like, lives down the way.
Oh, that's a coincidence.
Yeah, this whole thing. He reconnects with his mom, which
How old would he be now?
In his teens.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry, I'm kind of glossing over
He's
this.
not, like, 6, just sort of coming over with his, like, red wagon, like, hi, Mom.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure John reconnects with his mom. His mom gives him a harmonica or something. I think his first venture into music is a harmonica, and I remember hearing in interviews Paul talking about how he knew ukulele chords from his mom, Julia. So that was his introduction into rock and roll, was through his mom, and just, through the climate. It was the late 50s,
Yeah, that seems like it would be his mom, the free spirit one.
Yeah, the free spirited. She was like a redhead.
Oh, redheads.
Redheads, And so then he forms the Quarrymen, which it would go on to become the Beatles.
With what is it, Pete Best or whatever?
Yeah, Pete Best is eventually in the picture. But I guess another detail in this, I didn't realize it happened in this period, but whatever. John's mom remarries and has 2 more daughters. So
he's got sisters now.
He's got sisters, but it is kind of like this weird, like, illegitimate dynamic as, like, the banished son, and now his mom has a new family without him. They do accept him, and his mom is crazy about him. There's stuff we can get into. He does, like, there is sort of this theme of an Oedipus complex that shows up sometimes, which is like
Fuck Freud.
But it's just I can do a whole thing on that. It's a little scary.
Oedipus?
Oedipus? I don't know how to.
I think it's
Oedipus.
Well, it's spelled O-D. It's like O-E-D-I-U-P-U-S, I think.
Oedipus?
That really doesn't matter.
I don't know. Continue. I've been saying Epidus this whole time, but I haven't bothered to check. I don't know. Whatever. Point is, and there's also this biopic movie that's probably the greatest Beatles biopic available, because, I mean, there's not much competition, called Nowhere Boy. Fantastic movie. However, the director was an elder woman who ended up engaging the kid who plays John, who was like 19. And so in that movie, John has crazy sexual chemistry with the woman who plays his mom, which we think is, that was just kind of like the director manifesting her own, but like there is this, that's a whole nother thing that we can talk about.
That would be episode like 7-ish.
It's intense. So, like, all this stuff happens. John forms the Quarrymen, and that's named after the school, Quarrybank School, or Quarrybank. I don't think it's called high school.
Like junior high or like secondary school.
Yeah, secondary school, something like that. And so basically he forms the Quarrymen. Okay, so the Quarrymen were a skiffle group at first.
Is that a genre in music?
It's like, yeah, it's kind of like makeshift rock. Okay. Think of like a tea-chest bass.
Look, man,
like,
you're gonna have to
like washboard, like,
okay. So the thing where you like run the stick.
You gotta remember, this was also like Liverpool. This wasn't London. So while it was one of the bigger cities in Great Britain,
it was like this.
It was still kind of like to the side, you know. It's kind of like being from, like in California. Yeah, you're from like a UC town, but you're not from LA.
Yeah.
That kind of idea. So this was kind of makeshift rock and roll, and rock wasn't, as readily available as it is today. So this was what they, formed as skiffle group. And yeah, they played, moderately, but so the fateful day.
Wait, are you gonna go back and talk about Paul's childhood and Ringo's and George's childhood?
I can. I feel like just doing it this way, being like, because meets Paul.
Maybe. Oh yeah, and then going back.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So July 1957. John is 17.
So John has formed a skiffle band before he meets the other future
Beatles.
Gotcha.
Yes. Paul, they're introduced by a mutual friend whose name is like Ian or Ivan. I think his name is Ivan.
But Ian sounds more British.
And then Ian. They're introduced by Ian at one of the Quarrymen's gigs.
Interesting.
So John's group plays. Paul comes to see him.
I like that one. Right, Governor?
Right. Exactly. We should make a biopic ourselves. So, enact it.
Hello, mate.
Hey, Governor.
I like your rock and roll.
So yeah, garden feet. I'm not sure what a feet is, or FETE.
Oh, no.
That's what they call it everywhere. It's always a feat, and I think that might be a British word.
Okay. If anybody's British out there,
write
in and tell us what FETE means.
I think it's pronounced feet.
Fete.
Garden feet. Fete. I don't know. Some sort of get together at St. Peter's Church in Liverpool.
Interesting. All right.
So in the Quarrymen with John, there's a kid named Eric, Colin, Rod, Pete Shutton, was one of John's good friends, and Len on a tea-chest bass.
That whole phrase was so British.
What was? Your names?
Name is Rod.
Rod. Yeah, like Rod Stewart. He's on banjo.
No,
Rod.
Like imagine your name is just Rod.
Like a rod.
Like I'm going to twirl Rod like a baton.
Yeah, so if you want, this is the picture of the thing. They perform on the back of a truck.
Well, this is an audio medium, so I'll just describe what I'm looking at.
Go for it.
It's sort of a grimy old pickup truck with sort of like an empty back. There are no walls, just like a flat back, and there's a bunch of young-looking 50s men sort of loitering on here. Looks like there's some drums and a amp.
And an amp.
And they're playing music.
Is there an amp on there?
Well, what's this black box that this flannel man is standing on?
Could be
anything.
Look it up. It's
on Wikipedia.
I think that's a tea-chest. Well, because this would have been acoustic. This is like preamps.
Oh. Well, then it's not an amp.
Yeah, so...
If that technology didn't exist.
Well, I'm sure it did exist, but it was a rarity.
Yeah, only in NASA.
Only at NASA. Exactly. So...
All the NASA rock stars.
They're out of this world. You heard them.
Ha ha ha.
So, John is 17. Paul is 15. And Paul is brought to come see this group. And so, basically... Okay. It says, and I'm quoting the BeatlesBible.com. This is my favorite website.
All right. Everybody look that up. BeatlesBible.com.
BeatlesBible.com. Great website. The pair chatted for a few minutes, and McCartney showed Lennon how to tune a guitar.
That's it?
Well, McCartney then sang Eddie Cochran's 20 Flight Rock and Gene Vincent's Bebop-A-Lula, along with a medley of songs by Little Richard. And Lennon was impressed with McCartney.
You sound like the lady who reads the documents on like state testing. You will now be read a passage. Please listen carefully.
Okay, and I think that's a good enough explanation of, right? Pete Shutton is one of the primary people in John's life. He's like his bestie at this point.
Does he continue to be a rhyme figure?
He doesn't for a while. Like he's just kind of
leaves.
preliminary.
Okay.
But at the time they were besties, and so John consulted Pete, and they decided that McCartney would be someone to. They scouted him.
All right.
So yeah. So now Paul's in John's band.
All right, you gotta talk about the Paul John dynamic at some point.
We definitely
later.
can.
Another episode.
My God.
That's a whole episode.
Yeah, the like preliminary stuff isn't my forte.
Yeah.
So you can probably tell that this isn't. I'm just kind of reciting facts.
She's read a lot of large books on the later stuff.
I have read many large books, and I mean, but we're coming up to Hamburg, which I'm not sure we're gonna have time for in this episode. But Hamburg is so much fun to talk about.
Yeah, why don't you just talk about Paul's upbringing to now, and then we'll end.
So Paul had an elder brother named Mike, and I don't think he had any other siblings. Let me check. Paul is also a billionaire.
Oh, what?
Yeah. I've read this Forbes article about how he's the richest musician
currently
alive.
Or was?
Currently. Oh, no, he was not a billionaire. No.
I was going to be like, that's a strange...
No. Working class hero is something to be. But now he's a billionaire. Okay, it doesn't say siblings. He had a brother named Mike, and I don't think any other siblings. And he was actually poorer than John, technically.
Poorer than John.
Poorer, yeah. Which is he pointed that out in some interview that I was watching about how John on Plastic Ono Band in the early 70s, Working Class Hero is something to be. That John was always more kind of attuned to elitism throughout their career together.
It seems like that continues to be.
Oh yeah, definitely. That John was very opposed to like intellectual elitism because John was, by all accounts, a very smart guy.
Yeah.
But he was working class, and he was from Liverpool, and he was, didn't have a college degree, etc.
Yeah.
Paul was much more. He was happier to kind of gloss over that attitude people had in order to kind of like, if you can't beat them, join them kind of way.
So he was sort of like, if I may make a terribly cringy Hamilton reference, Alexander Hamilton, once he gets rich after becoming like a statesman, and then all of a sudden is like tries to silence the voices of the poor.
I mean, Paul never tried to silence the voices of the poor.
Well, not in that. I mean, once he became rich, he stopped trying to even relate to people who were poor.
He was the king of fake it till you make it.
Okay.
So while John was more attached to this working class identity, and like kind of like working class revolution, hey Marx, how you doing? But like Paul was happy to kind of get rid of that, even if people make weird remarks, to just be Paul McCartney,
All right.
Whereas John was,
You gotta kind of respect that, I guess.
However, John technically was raised better off than any other Beatle.
It's almost like the one who was more like better off wanted that sort of scrappy upbringing.
They were all working class because at the time Britain was like an extremely class divided place.
I can imagine.
Like crazy class structure.
Yeah.
And so they both, they were all from Liverpool. They're all working class, but he was technically better off.
Gotcha.
So that's part of the dynamic.
Yeah.
Paul's mother died before John's mom died. They both died. Paul's mom, when did Paul's mom die? One sec. Yeah, so Paul's mom dies in 1956, so he'd be 13 or 14. And then John's mom dies in 1958. So John is 18.
But that's a very similar time.
Both teenagers.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that really bonded them together.
Yeah. Was
going through such a traumatic
dead parent
experience. Yeah. So, And again, Paul's always he didn't really let his mother's death get to him, seemingly. Obviously, that
He was just
breaks
the
a
more
person.
stoic one.
Yeah, Paul's always had that attitude, though.
Yeah.
Like, even after John's death, which is skipping a lot, but, like, on the day after John died...
Oh, spoilers.
Spoilers, John died.
Lennon dies.
But the day after John's death, Paul, now kind of infamously, is confronted by press, and they go, "Oh, John's dead. How are you feeling?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's a drag." So Paul's never been one to really emote, I guess. He does through his music, but yeah.
He saved it all for the stage.
Yeah, he does kind of. But John, his mother's death was kind of like an ultimate undercurrent throughout all of his music. Yeah. And honestly, kind of like the beginning of the downward spiral of a lot of his life. Like, he had crazy mommy issues. We can get into his love life eventually, but it's a little crazy.
I can Yoko kind of had that weird, commanding presence.
Yeah. And his nickname for Yoko was mother.
It's like, remember when Mike Pence called his wife mom or something?
What?
Never mind, not important.
Anyways, so they all kind of join together. They play a little bit, the Quarrymen, and then I think we can end it here after this. George Harrison is introduced, my favorite Beatle. So Paul and George.
So many names.
And they're all the same name. John, Paul, and George are the same name. Tell me otherwise. So, Paul and George went to the same school.
Alright.
The same grammar school. And they were both kind of like rock and roll guitar dudes, even though George was a year younger. They, kind of bonded over that.
Yeah.
And so after about a year of being in John's band, Paul introduces George. And he very famously plays this song called Raunchy that goes dun 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 dun.
I kind of recognize that.
That's the entire song, just that.
Alright. Well, not a lot of show skill.
Well, at the time it was crazy.
Alright.
At the time it was like, oh my god, you are...
3 notes in succession? What are we doing?
Well, you gotta remember, this was like... There's a story about... Paul tells about going across all of Liverpool to find a dude who could show them how to play B7 on the guitar.
Okay, that's gotta be somewhere in one of these episodes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the entire story.
Alright, then it was.
But that's a good representation of the environment that they were growing up in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's so different to today, where rock has become this esteemed genre. And,
right. Rock didn't really exist.
No, they all taught themselves how to play their instruments. They all taught themselves how to play, what rock was.
That probably had to do with, being poor in London. Probably a lot of people didn't know how to... Or not London, sorry.
Same thing, Liverpool.
Whatever, Liverpool. A lot of people probably didn't know how to play instruments, huh?
Yeah. I mean, John's mom teaching him how to play ukulele chords is a very, substantial bit of information. Whereas today, you just, can find a guitar teacher in 5 seconds and...
Yeah.
But... So George impresses the Quarrymen, and he famously auditions for them atop one of those double-decker buses.
Oh my god.
Which is so cute.
They seem to be playing music on a lot of vehicles.
Yeah, that's definitely a theme. It's so music fun. On the go. But yeah, so he auditions for them atop a double-decker bus, and they say yes. And there we have it. The core 3 lineup established. Ringo doesn't come along for a while.
Poor Ringo.
So I hope, and George's family life is literally so boring. He has, I'm not sure, does he have...
do your own research.
He literally just has,
can't tell you everything.
Parents, and his parents are, really boring and, supportive and, no trauma.
Yeah. Alright, well then, I don't care about him.
So yeah, that's John, Paul, and George.
Alright.
I hope that was in some way linear. I hope you could follow that, and I hope that wasn't too long and boring.
It makes sense.
It's just laying the foundations to have more conversations later on,
I mean,
as
you just
this
gotta
develops.
know how, their backstory. So
right.
You,
You
like,
just
the
gotta
plot makes
remember,
sense.
John and Paul, both mothers dead. John's broken as fuck, though.
Yeah.
Paul's basically fine.
He's broken. What is it? She's broken. He's okay.
Let's not go there.
He would have been like he would have listened to like My Chemical Romance.
I think about that all the time. If they were to have been born, like in our current climate,
You gotta write some fan
it's kind
fiction,
of a
man.
mess. John being born. Unless I don't want to talk about that.
Okay. Anyway, that is the end of our episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Once again, I'm Rachel Levin, and this is
Dun, dun, dun.
she. Just sort of the noise of construction. That has been This Marvelous Beat, a Beatles/Marvel fan cast.
Yeah,
and we don't have an outro.
Yeah.
We don't have an outro, so
signing off. XOXO.
Gossip Girl.
Gossip.
No,
can we do that?
That's intellectual property.
Can we do that?
That's intellectual property. We have to think of something unique.
What do you? Fuck unique.
What isn't your whole thing that like? No, okay.
What's my whole thing?
You're like, fuck the man. We're gonna be.
I'm a communist.
Okay.
But also XOXO.
XOXO. Karl Marx.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
XOXO. Karl Marx. Woo.
Thanks, guys.